In mid-December 1950, the Korean front stabilized near the 38th parallel, and the Sabre-equipped 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing arrived at Kempo airfields outside Seoul. The Sabre represented many firsts in technology and design. Swept wing configuration had become a standard for jet-powered aircraft. The then revolutionary but now commonplace flying tail allows the aircraft excellent maneuverability at high altitudes. In addition, the Sabre employs a hydraulic system for the movement of the flight controls, eliminating the excessive control stick forces necessary to maneuver other types of airplanes at high speeds. Identifying features of the F-86 are the graceful swept-back wing and the nose inlet located in the fuselage. Armament of the fighter versions of the aircraft consisted of 3 50-caliber machine guns buried in each side of the fuselage near the nose, and provisions for carrying 2 1,000-pound bombs or 16 5-inch rockets on the wings. Interceptor versions of the aircraft carried 24 2.75-inch rockets mounted on a retractable tray contained in the bottom of the fuselage. The tray extended only long enough to launch the rockets. Outnumbered 4-1, the F-86 proved their worth. Although the numbers were not large, many of the newly arrived American fighter pilots were World War II veterans with considerable flying and combat experience, whereas U.S. intelligence had revealed that the North Korean and Chinese pilots were much younger and lacked such combat experience.
Now, the Air Force then had to grow, had to expand very rapidly in order to meet the demands of the Korean War, and many of these World War II guys were brought back in. But they were not, regular officers. They had been reservists in World War II, most of them, and might have stayed on as active reserve back in their civilian communities or Air National Guard people, but they were recalled to active duty. And they did carry the load because the majority fell into that category.
Among these old-timers were baseball player Ted Williams, future TV sidekick Ed McMahon, and future astronaut John Glenn. One of the most successful of these retreads was Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, one of only 7 pilots to achieve ace status both in World War II and the Korean War. In 1940, he applied to join the Army Air Corps, but, awkward and nervous, was almost washed out of flight school. Sent to fight in Europe, he flew with a Polish squadron of the RAF before becoming a member of the USAF's 56 Fighter Group. Flying P-47 Thunderbolts, he recorded 28 kills before being shot down and taken as a prisoner of war in the summer of 1944. Gabreski was in his 30s when the Korean War gave him a second chance at air combat. Leading the 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing, he was credited with shooting down 6.5 MiGs. Like many pilots who had fought in World War II, Gabreski disdained newfangled technology such as radar-controlled gun sights. An inveterate gum chewer, he would pick some gum out of his mouth as he entered combat and stick it to his Sabre's windshield to line up his shot. His natural ability never let him down. There were strange echoes of World War I in the Korean conflict. As on the Western Front during the Great War, the most important function of air power was to support ground troops engaged in a grim and desperate war of attrition. But once again, it was the fighter pilots and their contest for air superiority that grabbed the headlines. The duel between MiG-15s and Sabres in MIG Alley over the Yalu achieved legendary status as a classic of aerial combat, even while the fighting was still in progress. It was the setting for the first all-jet air war. The MiG pilots generally operated in formations up to more than 50 strong. The far less numerous Sabre pilots were aggressive, eager for action, and intensely competitive. Not since World War I had the pursuit of ace status, 5 kills, had such importance. The fighting in MiG Alley was a study in contrasting tactics and styles of warfare. The great strength of the MiG-15s was their performance at high altitude. Cruising at 48,000 feet and at just below Mach 1, the MiG was unreachable by the Sabres. If they stayed at that kind of altitude, as they often did, the Sabres were denied the possibility of air combat. When the MiG pilots were more aggressively inclined, a number of them would peel away from the mass formation and dive on the Sabres patrolling far below. They would try to get in a shot at the Americans before pulling back up, using their superior rate of climb to escape. These tactics were known to the American pilots as yo-yo, or when the MiGs came out of the sun and climbed back towards it again as zoom and sun. The Sabre pilots had an aircraft that was faster than the MiG in level flight and more effective at lower altitudes. If they could engage the MiGs in a dogfight, they had a high chance of success. One effective tactic was dubbed Jetstream. 16 Sabres would enter MiG Alley in flights of 4 at a few minutes interval. If the MiG could be tempted to dive on one of the flights, the others would converge to counterattack. The Sabres operated at a significant disadvantage in that they were always far from their bases, and even with drop tanks, they never had more than 20 minutes in the battle zone. The MiGs mostly remained within a few minutes flying time of their bases over the Chinese border. The Sabres were constantly outnumbered, usually by 3 or 4 to 1, yet they had far better results in the air duels. The crucial factor was pilot quality. Most communist flyers were good at following instructions, but showed little initiative or aggression and often made basic errors in dogfights. The American pilots displayed an outstanding hunger for battle. They had the right stuff, and this proved decisive.